Hello there, this is Jan Chappell, and you are listening to The Sirens of Audio.
When I click this mouse, my rating will be deleted. The poison coming from my fingertips onto the keyboard could kill their view count in a moment. It is a perfect, efficient ratings killer. It will be painless, they say. They tell me they want my review as if they would, and that just by clicking this mouse, I will end their internet obscurity forever. They say I should be the one to do it, but they are insecure. They cannot bring themselves to read it, let alone read it aloud on their show. They hesitate. They fear me. Even when I am here alone on my computer and they have their perfect, pure and popular podcast, they fear me. And well they should. I no longer like them. I am above them. I have the ultimate power, the power of life and death via Twitter. This keyboard, this smartphone is my dominion. Mine to command, no one else's. I can sense them out there, on their YouTube channel, cowering, not daring to be controversial. They are the frail ones. They are the boomers. They are the ones without choice. Their podcast will die. They will read my review and they will die. I could join them in celebrating all that is good about audio drama. But if I post this abhorrent review, then something stronger will emerge. A new podcast, the supreme power in fandom. I will not delete my review. I will not cower. I will go live. I will go live. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. G'day Audiophiles, this is The Sirens of Audio, the podcast that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium. My name's Dwayne.
And my name's Philip. G'day Audiophiles, g'day Dwayne.
How are you?
I am doing great.
You know what I got yesterday?
What did you get yesterday?
Because of the upsurge in Omicron down here in Tassie, I thought I'll just order my Galaxy 4 through the post, and it's been out 10 days or so in Australia so far, and I just got it in the post yesterday because the post is so slow, especially from JB for some reason. I don't know why, but I got my Galaxy 4 yesterday and watched that.
What's it like?
The story has its faults, yes. It's not the most perfect story, and it could be criticised for being very slow, but I just loved it. And the colour version is incredible. I enjoyed that, and it's got a beautiful, beautiful documentary with Toby Hadoke and Peter Purvis. You remember?
Yeah.
Peter, when he spoke to us, that was obviously from his house, and so the interview on the DVD was set in his house, and he was walking around the house and talking with Toby. It was really, really, because Peter Purvis is known for hating Galaxy 4.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to get him talking about it and sharing some of the positive aspects of that story. Really interesting documentary about the discovery of it as well, because it's been 10 years since episode 3, Airlock, was discovered. So that was a really, really cool documentary as well, because I think that same guy who discovered Galaxy 4 in his film collection also had the copy of Underwater Menace episode 2.
2.
Yeah. So that one was discovered in the same collection, and it was very interesting because this guy's not a Doctor Who fan. He just collected film, and he just so happened to know Ralph Montague, who had a little bit to do with Doctor Who, and he sort of asked him, "Oh, have you got any Doctor Who?" And he sort of scratched his chin and went, "Oh, I have got some Doctor Who." And this film collector had no idea what he was in for. It was funny in a way, but it sort of gives you a little bit of hope that there might be something out there, that these film collectors who don't really follow Doctor Who, they still might have something out there.
Yeah, there's more out there, I've no doubt. There's a complete copy of Marco Polo, and I think that's in Australia somewhere. The worst thing's going to be some people have got these, they think they're fans. The biggest worry is they're going to die, and the family won't know what they've got, and it'll just get chucked. That's my biggest fear. Because, I'm totally convinced there's stuff out there, and people have it, and people know they have it, but they just hang on to it because they're special.
Because why? I don't understand.
Because they're special, because they have something no one else has.
Right.
Some people just like to have what no one else can have.
That still doesn't make any sense to me.
No, me either. Did you see there's been some
because this film collector's still got the original film. They haven't taken it off him. He's still got the film in his collection, and he gets his little projector out in the shed and he keeps watching it. And it's still special to him in that regard that he's got that. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, today we're going to be talking with Peter Anghelides. And he's going to be joining us very soon, so I better not jump in that rabbit hole. Otherwise, we'll be in the rabbit hole, and he'll turn up. So I wondered, Philip, have you heard because Peter, we're going to talk to him a little bit about Blake 7 as well as his Doctor Who work, because he's very involved with the current iteration of Blake 7. Have you heard the Blake 7 Reborn series?
I have heard some of them. I do actually own them all.
Yeah, me too. I haven't heard them all yet either. I think Big Finish got the distribution rights a while back, and they put out all 10 episodes in a bundle a while back, and I thought, oh, yeah, I've got to get that, because when it originally came out, I bought the first 3 CDs, I think, so I've got the CDs, those first 3 episodes somewhere. I had absolutely no idea that they'd made 10 of them, and from memory, I've only heard them the one time when I first got them. It must be at least 10 years ago, if not more. And I do remember thinking how good they were. Because the stories are a similar storyline with these different actors playing the role. And I thought it was an interesting take on it. So you haven't heard any of them?
I think I've heard 1 or 2. I mean, they recast a lot of them too. So, it's some amazing actors.
I think Villa's the only one that's there that's not recast.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So they're amazing. Yeah, I've listened to one. I believe I enjoyed it, but it was a long time ago. When Big Finish told them all, I grabbed them all, but I just haven't got to them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly a series I think we should definitely delve into at some point and give it a listen. It's just 10 episodes, though. It's like, whoa, that's a big chunk. Once I get started, I like to keep going and to devote myself to 10 hours worth of material at least.
Yeah.
Is a big commitment. Big commitment.
Well, there's a few things that have been released so far this month I still haven't got to. So,
yeah.
So much to do, so little time.
Yeah, on the day of recording, we've got Charlotte Pollard, 8th Doctor, and Charlie Pollard, the Further Adventurous, dropping.
Yeah, in fact,
that should have dropped by now, actually.
No, 15 minutes time. Oh,
15 minutes.
Oh no, it should have dropped in the UK. You're right.
Yeah. So I didn't even check before we jumped on. I could be downloading it right now, Philip. Could be there by the end.
Could have done the same thing.
But I haven't even heard Terra Nostra yet, which we're going to talk to Peter about. Did you get a chance to hear any of that?
No, unfortunately, I didn't get to listen to it either.
It's still only very fresh.
It is. It only just came out a couple of days ago.
And I'm keen to have a look at that episode that it's based on too, Shadow. So before I listen to it, I just
Shadow is a fantastic. Shadow was I think probably the first episode I saw, and it was recorded on video, and I probably watched it 3 times in a row. So right. I have very strong memory. So Shadow was my first episode of Blake 7 I saw, because I didn't see it in the first season, and when I jumped in, it was Shadow was the first one I saw.
Yeah, cool. All right, well. Let's throw in a trailer. Now, Peter's done a lot of things in the Doctor Who universe as well as Blake Seven, but his first foray into audio was the Sarah Jane Smith series that Big Finish did many, many years ago. And he wrote the season 1 finale, didn't he? Mirror, Signal, Maneuver.
Brilliant.
So let's throw in a trailer for that. We'll throw in a trailer for that right here, and we'll come back in a moment with Peter Anghelides.
Goodbye, Miss Winters.
And this time, Sarah Jane Smith, you'll be finished for good.
Sarah Jane Smith. Mirror, Signal, Maneuver.
Sarah, Josh. I've got the info you requested from the Public Records Office. Interesting stuff.
Not even a small tip either?
My small tip is mirror, signal, maneuver as you drive away.
Hi, it's Natalie. I really need to talk to you. There's stuff we should talk about, and you holding out on me isn't going to help. Oh yeah, there's someone from Planet 3 been looking for you. She's been asking after you since you went to Romania.
You have worked hard to locate me, and you have been lucky, Miss Smith, that's all.
Sarah, you still haven't phoned. Well, you know that, so I suppose you must know how worried you're making me. Sarah, where are you?
Well, we do seem to have a lot in common, Wendy. So, what do you think of...
Shh.
Not now, I've been spotted. What?
Look around the boat, casually as though you've dropped something. Now, see the man who's trying not to look at us, at the other end of the boat.
Tall, well-dressed bloke. Bit overdressed for this heat, must be European.
He's been following me since Monday.
Sarah, where are you? Get in touch.
Come with me to the car, Sarah, now, or I'll leave without you. We have to get off these islands.
You're looking in your rear-view mirror all the time for something that's not there.
Mirror, signal, maneuver.
Oh, now that would be too much of a coincidence. And in our paranoid little world, we don't like coincidences, do we?
Good evening, Miss Smith. A pleasure to meet you once again.
Well, we've just listened to that promo to the Sarah Jane Adventures, which was Peter's first story. And Peter, we are so glad to have you with us. So, Peter, thank you for joining us on the Sirens of Audio.
Thank you for asking me. It's nice to be with you.
Lovely. Can you just tell us whereabouts are you in the world?
I'm in the south of England, so I'm halfway between Southampton and Winchester, for those who know the area.
Lovely. Have you lived there long?
Since about 1995, I think. I used to live and work in the Midlands of England. And so I moved down here when the job changed. Goodness me, yes, it was 1995.
Right. Now, we know you primarily as a writer, but do you have another day job as well?
Yes, I worked for the computing and consulting company IBM since 1988. So writing is something I do because it interests me and it's nice to be involved. But it's not my full-time job, unlike some of the other people who you would have talked to. I think you spoke at length with Andrew Smith, who I've worked with recently. So a little bit like that. You know, Andrew was doing writing while he was forging a career in the police force, wasn't he?
He was, towards the later end, certainly. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your childhood? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the northwest of England. And I moved to Scotland for university. So I spent 6 years in Scotland on the East Coast and then in Glasgow. I was always a great enthusiast for television drama, well, television in general. My parents thought I was glued to the box more often than perhaps I should be. And because I've always enjoyed writing, I used to write fan stories, even back when I was in primary school and secondary school. I suppose that the first indication that I was going to be doing writing for tie-in franchises was that when I was in, let's have a think, it would have been when I was about 7 years old. We were all expected to write what we'd been doing at the weekend in our journal as our writing exercise for the day. And this was around the time of the Silurians being on its original broadcast. So each Monday, I would write in my report book. On Saturday at the weekend, I sat down at the television and started to watch episode 1 of Doctor Who and the Silurians, and here's what happened. And I would then relate the story. I think I managed to get away with that for about 5 episodes before I was encouraged to write something else.
The teacher didn't want to know how it ended?
Do you know, I should have used that as my excuse. But, now you tell me.
So you've always had a passion for writing. Now, at the moment you're involved with Blake Seven, but are you more of a Doctor Who fan or more Blake Seven? Where's your passion?
I think both equally. When I was in my late teens, some pals and I started a fanzine. This was sort of at the height of Doctor Who fanzines in printed format. And we decided that we would do a joint Doctor Who and Blake Seven fanzine called Frontier Worlds. And that was very much, an equal enthusiasm for both the stories, both for reviews and for fiction and for interviews and so on.
There does seem to be a very strong crossover between Doctor Who fans and Blake Seven fans. Why do you think there's such a connection between the two?
I suppose it's because they were both on the BBC and there was a sort of expectation set that they might be similar. Now, of course, it was aimed at a different audience from the BBC's point of view, but a lot of the production team were very similar, whether it was producers, directors, writers, occasionally actors as well. So there was that level of, I suppose, continuity and interest. And there's a sort of lazy assumption that all BBC science fiction is somehow tied together. So I suppose that was it. Although from the BBC's point of view, Blake Seven was very much seen as being an evening drama. It was, as I understand it, a replacement for Softly, Softly Task Force, which is a police procedural series. And for the first series, it had the same production slots and the same budget as well, which is all right if you are thinking about doing another police procedural, but a bit tricky if you don't have stock costumes for, futuristic people and aliens, or you don't have a big budget for special effects and so on that you wouldn't require for Softly, Softly Task Force.
There's something about creativity that comes out, though, in desperate circumstances, isn't it? That they had this lousy budget, they had hardly any money, and yet they still managed to create something so creative. We see Big Finish do the same thing all the time in terms of the Liberator Chronicles, where it just forces the writers to be more creative and more inventive.
Yeah, well, with the BBC, I think it was an assumption that it was reasonable to assume that you weren't going to have a huge on-screen budget. I mean, when you look back at it, even Star Trek, which was something I used to watch when I was a kid as well, it had a bigger budget than Doctor Who. But you look at some of the planets that they'd got, and they clearly weren't spending movie budget kinds of money on those things. So yes, you're right, and that means that you tend then to have to lean on the strengths of traditional TV drama from the BBC, which is the writing, the performances, and so on. When it comes to Big Finish, yes, you're absolutely right. Initially, the Liberator Chronicles were making the best of the fact that not all of the cast were either still around or yet interested in revisiting the series. But I think that can also be a virtue as well. Because if you do a two-hander with two of the cast or one of the regular cast and some other character, you end up thinking, well, it's not like the TV series where every week you've contracted all of the cast to take part in that episode, so they've all got to have something to do. You can just concentrate on the people who you really want to be in that particular episode and not have to have a couple of people just stuck behind a teleport desk.
Yeah, and the reality is in the TV series, they still often featured one or two actors only from the episode. Everyone else was just sort of just in the mix, but not doing much. I mean, David Jackson talks about the fact that he once went up to Terry Nation and said 3. That's how many lines he had in the whole script.
Yeah.
But and there's certainly different times, I think Blake Seven format allows one or two characters to come to the fore. You talked before about the fanzine that you created. What can you tell us a bit about your fandom experiences? Because I think you mixed with a number of other people who went on to illustrious Doctor Who and other fan.
Yeah, I suppose one of my early contemporaries in Doctor Who fandom was Gary Russell. I met him at a convention in London where we were both hawking our fanzines at a table, and clearly our joint interest in Doctor Who was a common thread. So he's the sort of person I've kept in touch with over the years. I've worked a lot with Justin Richards, who is not just an old friend, but also was a colleague at IBM. So I knew him before I joined IBM, worked with him at IBM, and I've worked with him subsequently. My old friend Craig Hinton is somebody else who I met through Doctor Who fandom and worked with at IBM over the years. Jeremy Bentham asked me and Justin to edit a fanzine called In Vision about the production of Tom Baker Doctor Who stories. So those are the kinds of people who I met early in my Doctor Who sideline career, and have kept in touch with ever since.
So were you ever involved with Gary's audiovisuals projects at all?
You know, I wasn't, although I discovered many years later, one of the people who Gary was thinking about commissioning for the very first set of Big Finish audios. He didn't mention this to me at the time. There was a get-together where various people were invited. I think people like Mark Platt and Stephen Moffat and Paul Cornell and so on were invited to someone's house in London to talk about this forthcoming project. This is after the Big Finish Benny audios had already established themselves. And they kindly invited me, and I was too busy, so I couldn't go, and I didn't know what it was. So I didn't know what they were up to until afterwards. But I discovered years later in the Big Finish, what's the book that they wrote that Kenny Smith plays? Yes. There was a list of, here are the people we might be talking to for this series. And there was my name listed. And that was the first time I knew about it. I thought, maybe I shouldn't have been so busy at the time. What's nice about the Big Finish series is you're commissioned on the basis of the fact that they think you can do it. They think you can do a good job and deliver something which is performable to a professional standard. You'll deliver on time, not because you're just their old mate. Though, let's be honest, it doesn't help. It doesn't harm being their old mate to be somebody who's in their mind at the time. Of course, then you let them down by not turning up for the meeting. So.
Well, famously, the only person who was at that meeting that didn't end up working for Big Finish was Stephen Moffat. So,
whatever happened to him?
I don't know. Something happened to him down the line, I'm sure.
So you were writing a lot for the fanzine. I assume writing fiction for that and other things as well?
Yes, and reviews and interviews. These were in the days when it was quite difficult to get hold of people to do interviews. So you used to do it by letter. Send a letter to them or their agent, and they would then politely write back, rather than have this kind of interaction that we're having here.
So in terms of professional, what was your first piece of paid writing?
For Doctor Who, it would probably be a story I wrote for Decalogue, or one of the Decalogue stories. It was a Sarah and K9 story. It was the Consequences collection. And the idea was that each story linked at the end to the following one, and then the final one linked to the first one. And I quite fancied doing something which is about Sarah and K9, but was sort of Doctor-free, just as a sort of novelty. And as is typical of my writing, I wildly overwrote it. I forget how many words I was supposed to do, but it was something like an extra third or an extra half as long as it should have been. But fortunately, somebody else had written something which was much shorter, so they had the space to fit it in without me having to hack it to pieces.
Oh, that's good.
So I suppose that would be about 1996, something like that.
Right, and that you then had quite a few different pieces of short stories and prose written in different places. Now, in terms of your first Big Finish, that was Sarah Jane Smith. So obviously you've got a bit of a thing for Sarah Jane Smith. How did you come to work for Big Finish? Because you didn't turn up at the meeting. Why did Gary invite you back, and how did you end up writing for Sarah Jane Smith?
I suppose it was because I'd written that Sarah Jane and K9 story that I might have been in people's minds. The first I knew about this was I was at a convention in Newcastle in the northeast of England, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, Elizabeth Sladen would like to have a word with you. I thought, oh, all right then, that sounds nice. And so I went across and had a chat with her, and she said that she was interested in asking whether I would write a story for this series she was doing for Big Finish. And instead of saying, oh, how wonderful, I've always loved your work, thank you very much, that sounds fantastic, I was so nervous, I said something crass like, was it because I was alphabetically first or something? And She politely ignored this faux pas, and I got in touch with Gary and was commissioned to write one of that first series of Sarah Jane Smith stories.
So she chose people like Barry Letts, Terrence Dix, and you.
Yeah, and David Bishop, and was it Rupert Lake the one?
That's right. Yeah. So what was it like? Was that your first script you'd written?
It was. Yeah. So I forget how I went about it. I think perhaps what I did was I got hold of a script that somebody else had written. I'm trying to remember how it happened now. Just to understand what the format and the layout was, because it wasn't like I'd been doing this all of my life. And it just struck me as being the best way to do it would be to find a template from someone else to understand things like just some of the basics, like how the dialogue is laid out, how the special effects are specified, and so on, to think through it. Trivial things that you don't want to be obstacles as you're writing. And I then used that as the basis for it. Gary is very good as a script editor in helping you to understand what's possible and what doesn't help in audio. So some of the best notes were simply things like him saying, "How will this work on audio?" in big block capitals on whatever I'd sent him in. And I see this myself now when people are sending me outlines or sending me scripts. You sometimes see something that says, this character smiles broadly. And you think, well, that's interesting as a performance note, but how's it going to come across in audio?
So you brought, the main villain was Miss Hilda Winters from Robot, which was a nice twist in terms of what the first season did. Did you do much research? Did you go back and watch Robot several times? What was your process in terms of writing?
Oh, I love doing research, partly because it's the more the research you do, the longer it takes to get around to writing. So yeah, I went and watched Robot again, though it's a story that had really stuck in my mind anyway. As I was writing it, it wasn't actually clear that we'd managed to get that actor available for the series. So when I wrote it, I wrote the outline and the first draft without her in, knowing that we might have her subsequently. And then when she came on board, I did a rewrite to be able to feature her so that she was in my story, and then she could be in some of the other ones as well.
Yeah, she popped in earlier on, didn't she? Did you get to go to the recording studio for the recording?
I did, yeah. So I went off to London to watch the recording. As is the way with these things, they record several episodes over the period of a week, and some of the scenes were, for mine, weren't done on that day. So, for example, Sadie Miller was playing one of the characters. She's playing Natalie.
Yep.
I showed she wasn't there that day because she'd done all of her contributions earlier in the week. But on the other hand, I got to hear Liz doing her speech for the very first episode where she talks about the death of Lavinia, which was lovely to hear, very moving. So yeah, and then I got a chance to go off to lunch with them and have a chat, and that was nice as well.
How interested was Liz in the direction of that particular series? Because she liked to have a lot of say in where Sarah Jane was headed, didn't she?
Oh, she was very keen, yeah, very much to her credit. And she'd played the character for years. She knew the character. She had some thoughts about what might have happened to her after she left the TV series. She'd done an interview, I think it was called The Actor Speaks. And so she sent me a tape of that, which was talking about why she thought her character might have gone after the TV series had finished. We had a chat on the phone. When she saw my script, she had some thoughts about things that worked and things that didn't work. So she mentioned those to me as well.
So she sort of acted like a second script editor after Gary?
It was not so much a sort of thorough edit of it, just occasionally pointing out what she thought might work better.
Fascinating. So you came back then to write for one of the Key to Time series, the Chaos Pool. So what was it like coming back and writing a full-scale story?
Oh, that was fascinating because it was part of a series along with I think Simon Guerrier had written the first one.
Yep.
So it was trying to fit things in, and mine was the one that tied everything up. I quite like doing jigsaw stories where I'm told, here are the components, here's where you need to end up. Then can you fit something in that accommodates all of these requirements? So I quite enjoyed doing that as well. And that was quite nerve-wracking because I was writing for two of the actors from the TV series who I really liked. Their performances, and Peter Davison and Lalla Ward. So very exciting to do that.
Yeah, it was a nice combination actually of people there.
When I was writing it, I was a bit worried that my cliffhangers weren't working, and so I've known Simon Guerrier for years. So I sent him. I can't remember whether it was the first draft or whether it was the outline, and to get his thoughts on it, because obviously he was writing one of the earlier ones. And I knew that it was probably going to be all right when the only comment he made on the cliffhangers that I had in that were the words "ha ha!" exclamation mark, which I took to be a positive.
So had the three of you writers got together to work out and plot what was going to go on? Because it's a fairly complex storyline that does intersect in terms of, one of the companions is the Tracer. And you bring in Lala at the end, but it does interweave. Did you actually get together, or was that something that Gary did as scriptwriter in terms of pulling?
It was mostly coordinated by the script editor. We didn't, as I recall, I don't think we read each other's scripts. Well, I shared my outline with Simon just to get his insights, and that's very very much the way it is with. The Blake Sevens that I've been doing most recently, as well as the script editor, is that I haven't shared the scripts or the outlines generally between the writers, not because I want to be secretive about it, but because I think it's good if they can concentrate on what they want to do. If they feel it helps, then I'm happy to share another script. But you want them to bring their whole selves to it, to bring the unique perspective and talent that they've got themselves to the script for which you've commissioned them.
Doctor Who, The Key to Time, The Chaos Pool.
The Chaos Pool exists! It was hidden well by its creators and must stay hidden. Even the Guardians couldn't locate it.
Chaos Pool! Chaos Pool! Chaos Pool!
It's you. Could that be it? Oh, I've waited a long time for this. And you're not going to get in my way, sister. Amy. Amy.
The satchel is disintegrating. The segments are decaying and destroying everything around them. Doctor, I'm going to die in here.
It burns so brightly.
It broken through, Commander. Seize this vessel and slaughter its crew.
APs, defend the commander. You, bring me the key.
The Teuthoidian horde is massing in hyperspace, unwitnessed, unstoppable.
A hyperspace foe will be a disaster. It won't just be one Teuthoidian vessel arriving from the other end of time. It will be dozens, maybe hundreds. It will cause the big crunch. An unstoppable torrent as the universe condenses to a singularity. Romana, can you hear me? It's the Doctor. Romana, are you there? It's the Doctor.
Now, one of the sort of things that we do in our podcasts, we do regularly a randomoids time where we just pull out things by random. And the last one we did was actually one of your scripts, which was the 4 Doctors.
Yes.
Now, of course, the disadvantage for lots of people is it's very hard to get if you're not a subscriber. You've got to jump over some certain hurdles to get it out of Big Finish. But it's an amazing script. How did you come to write this subscription part? And once again, 4 Doctors, big privilege being able to write for 4 Doctors. What sort of were you told in terms of what they wanted?
Well, I was told that they needed to record it along with some of the other episodes, and it was going to be an incentive for people to take out subscriptions, so it wasn't going to be available separately. So I knew that straight away. The idea was to write a multi-Doctor story where the Doctors never met. And again, I quite like these sorts of jigsaw stories as well. So I structured it. I think originally I called it Reverse Engineering was the title I gave it. And I wrote it as 4 episodes. And I envisaged it as being 1 episode for each of the Doctors, with a common thread running through it, which was the consistent character who they all meet and interact with, in reverse order as well. So you could play some games about what they might or might not have remembered. And I also envisage it as being, each of the episodes would have the theme tune for that particular Doctor for it. So that was in my head as I was writing it, and I knew that it couldn't have any of their companions in either. So I couldn't have India Fisher in the Paul McGann sequences, for example. So that was the kind of brief that I had, and I think that as I was writing it, I think that perhaps they lost confidence in it and the Doctors not all meeting up. And so by the time the thing went into studio, there'd been a scene inserted at the end where they do meet up in the TARDIS.
Did you write that or someone else write that?
I'm not sure whether Alan Barnes or Nick Briggs wrote that bit, but that wasn't me.
Yeah, you know what? You could feel it. It wasn't. Yeah, the flow wasn't quite the same as everything else. It was. I mean, it's a nice scene, and I do love the fact they all get together.
Oh, yes, it's a lovely scene. And had I known that they were going to do that, I would have
done it.
carefully written it. But on the other hand, that's the nature of these things. It was, put together in a slightly unusual way rather than a regular commission because of the way it was being recorded, how it's going to be made available. And of course, they made this solemn promise that you would never be able to get it unless you took out a subscription. They would never ever make it available in a separate release later on. So
and they've stuck to that.
They have, absolutely, yeah. Maybe they should do a novelization. I'm available.
And then actually, since the first couple of Doctor Who shows you didn't actually have companions at all. So even Peter, I guess you had Lala Ward, but she's not really the 5th Doctor's companion. So you've always been mingling companionless a bit. And then you wrote a companion Chronicles, and I adore this one, Feral's Folly from Mary Tam.
I love doing that one, yes. Because I was a great enthusiast for Romana 1. Was very disappointed when she left the series originally. Which isn't to say I didn't like Romana 2. I liked her as well, but I would have liked to see more of the first Romana. So doing something for the companion Chronicles was lovely. And I got to go into the studio for that as well.
What was Mary Tam like?
Oh, she's wonderful. Very straightforward and enthusiastic. I wish we'd had a chance to do more episodes with her with Big Finish.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who: The Companion Chronicles. Feral's Folly.
I had always worried about someone trying to break into my observatory. That's why I'd posted my guard in the hallway. But the last thing I'd expected was for intruders to break in from the roof.
The Doctor's voice was close to my ear. Are you sure those boots are suitable for an observatory? I almost fell off the edge with surprise. Is this a good time to swap fashion tips? And what do you mean, observatory? Well, we're obviously on the outer edge of a wooden astronomical observatory. Feral's Folly, we call it. She can control metal. Very unusual. Very clever. Very dangerous. Oh, Doctor, where are you?
Your friend isn't coming to your rescue, so your use is at an end.
Oh, you can't be serious.
Knights! Chop off her head!
Subscribers get more at bigfinish.com.
What's the difference between writing just a two-hander, like you did then, and writing a full script?
The difference really with the Companion Chronicles is that they are essentially narrated books. And so you need to have one or other of the characters relating what's happening to everybody else, themselves, and so on. So you want to have a perspective from that character. So they are right in the center of the scene. So that's a bit of a difference, is you're really focusing on that person and what their reactions and perceptions are. Whereas with a full cast audio, you're trying to illuminate what they're doing by their interactions with someone. And although you can have them talking about their experience, you're witnessing it as a third person. rather than through the eyes of specifically one of those characters. And of course, the full cast audios are all dialogue and sound effects, whereas there are sections of narration for the Companion Chronicles and indeed the Liberator Chronicles as well. I thought I'd explore and experiment a bit more with one of the Liberator Chronicles that I did. It was the first one that Stephen Pacey recorded as Tarrant. Incentive,
yep.
Yeah, and there, in order to make it a bit more plausible that Avon was relating what had been going on, I made it part of him talking to somebody else.
Interrogation, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that was much closer to a full cast audio in the sense that you had 3 actors playing the roles, and there wasn't quite so much of the leads talking about where people were walking or what they were seeing or what they were doing.
Yeah. So February is the 10th anniversary of Blake 7 coming to big finish. And so...
I should, of course, at this point say, yes, of course, I knew that. But I didn't. Fancy that.
That's okay. I didn't ask you to do any research. So it was... Yeah, so... and when Blake 7 first came to big finish, you were one of the 3 writers they asked to write. Mm-hmm. So in the first Chronicles, and you wrote the story Counterfeit. So what was it like knowing Blake 7 was... Well, what did you know about Blake 7 coming to big finish? Are you aware of the process in terms of how hard it was to get the rights to it? And how were you commissioned?
I didn't know anything about the rights process. I knew that Blake 7 is notoriously tangled when it comes to the rights for what couldn't be used. But really, it was a straightforward commission. David Richardson asked me to pitch some ideas, explaining what the basis of the Liberator Chronicles were. And of course, there was a model from the Companion Chronicles anyway. So that was it wasn't like they were just describing something I'd never encountered before. So and with that, I knew that Simon Guerrier was writing, I think, the first one, the Turing Test. Yep. So I think for that, I may well have got Simon's script just to see how those things were being laid out and what the tone was, that kind of thing. It was especially nice to do that because I'd been involved. This was one of the periods of time when I'd been asked to pitch ideas for Tom Baker Fourth Doctor stories. I think I've been asked to do that 2 or 3 times, and once when Tom eventually decided he didn't want to do any anymore. Sorry, didn't want to do them to start with. And that was when Alan Barnes had asked me years and years and years ago. And then when Tom had actually decided to come on board with Big Finish, I'd been asked to come up with ideas and suggestions for a 4-part story based on Nerva. So I did that, and then they said, well, actually, no, we're going to do them as 2-parters now. So I reworked it as a 2-parter. And then it got to having done several drafts of that, and they said, sorry, it's not working out. And I was quite put out and disappointed. I mean, there's the way things work. You never guaranteed a commission, and it has to meet the needs. So I was really downhearted. And so when David said, oh, by the way, we're doing some Blake 7, would you like to have a go at one of those? It really perked me up. Because, of course, that's my other great enthusiast.
The first Tom Baker story did end up being set on Nerva. So were any elements of that story of yours taken into that story that Nick Briggs ended up writing?
Completely different. No, he didn't. He didn't raid me for ideas. No, he came up with his own. And it's a super story as well. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. So do you still have the original Nerva story you had?
I have, let's say, repurposed it for other things.
Okay. Excellent. Okay.
There's only so many times they can visit Nerva, though, I suppose.
Yes. Okay. Well, yeah, it'd be lovely to hear where it turns up elsewhere. I guess, when you have a good idea, you want to keep working out how to use it somewhere well, don't you? So, I guess part of the reason why I assume Liberator Chronicles startups was financial in terms of they couldn't afford the giant cast. So, the trouble with Blake 7 is once you actually just have the main crew, you've got 6 people throwing Servalan or Travis, or, you've got 8, and then you want some guest stars. which just makes the whole audio process very expensive.
And that was true for the TV series as well. As I say, bear in mind that it was originally commissioned as a replacement for Softly Task Force, which had a similar large cast. And you get the same thing that nowadays with series like Casualty or Holby City or any of the soaps. But with a long continuing series, you can afford to have a subset of your cast appearing at different times. So, Ken Barlow isn't in every episode of Coronation Street, for example. But, you expect the characters to recur. Whereas with a limited run of 13, you pretty much want to have all of your actors in every episode.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, the only occasion when that really didn't happen on Blake 7 was because the character hadn't turned up yet. So you don't get...
Callie's episode 4, yeah.
Yeah, you don't get Avon in the way back. You don't get Callie until she turns up on Saurian Major and so on.
Yeah.
But you never have an episode where... Villa or Gan aren't in that episode at all once they're in the main run. So yes, you're right. There's a consideration that you want to have all of the cast, and you're obviously paying for all of the cast. And if you're doing that, you want them to be doing something useful and significant for your plot. Not least because you want the actors who are involved to feel enthusiastic about taking part.
So after a lot of successful Liberator Chronicles, and once again they stretched the envelope a lot in different storytelling and how far you could go. I think it was a celebration, I think it might have been an anniversary, they decided to do Warship, which was the first full cast Blake's in production. How do you get chosen to do that? Great. That started out as being another Liberator Chronicle. David Richardson wanted to do a series about what had happened after Star One, and there was a sort of joke about the reason I was asked to do one of them was because he wanted me to do the one about what happened to Blake and how he got to Gouda Prime. And the reason for this and the joke was that some of my pals and I had got to go on the set of the recording of Blake at BBC Television Centre. We've been invited along by Veer Lorimer to go and observe. So Davy's joke was, well, you've already been to Gouda Prime, so you'll know how it works out. So that was the original idea. I was going to do the one about Blake. Steve Lyons was writing the one about Jenna, and then somebody else was going to write the one about the events of the war itself. What happened immediately after the end of Star One. And for some reason, that other author couldn't do it. I think they were too busy. And so I said to David, well, I quite fancy doing that one because I like jigsaw stories. So I'm quite happy to sew together what happened between Star One and Aftermath. And somebody else can write the Blake story. So they asked Cav and Mark to write the Blake story, and I got to write the Liberator Chronicle for the war. And as I was doing this, I was told, here are the characters you can use. And the more I was working through the outline, the more they said, well, actually, you can have these characters as well. You can have pretty much all the characters from the TV series. So I'd written an outline for a Liberator Chronicle, which had narrated sections of story for all of the leads. So there was a section where Avon's talking about what's going on. There's a section where Villa's talking about what's going on. I was even experimenting with having a section where Aurak was talking about what was going on. And then they had a look at this, and the rights owner had a look at it and said, well, if you're doing that, you might as well make it a full cast audio. So I said, oh, no, I don't want to do that. No, I didn't. I said, yes, of course. I'd love to do that. Thank you very much. And they decided to make it a standalone episode on its own. And they then commissioned something else to fill the gap on the 3-part Liberator Chronicles set, which by a happy coincidence, I had an idea for as well. We'll see you in the end.
Yeah. So I got 2 for the price of 1. So I think I did quite well out of that. And then, as a result of having done that outline about, here's a chunk of stuff for Villa to do, here's a chunk of stuff for Avon to do, here's a chunk of stuff for Callie to do, and so on, that helped with the full cast audio, because that thing I was saying about you want all your actors to be involved, all your characters to have something meaningful to do, I'd already thought that through in terms of a narrated story. And when it came to writing the full cast audio, they all had a good chunk of action, which is great because when you're writing these things, I suppose there are sort of 4 audiences that you're writing for when you're writing The Big Finish. One is you're writing for yourself. You want to have fun while you're doing it because there's no point being miserable as you're writing. So you need to, feel enthusiastic about it. So on the occasions when I've been asked by other companies to write stuff for them, if I didn't understand the franchise or if I didn't like the series, I would say, thanks for asking, but no thanks. But, with Doctor Who and Blake 7, I love it. So I have great fun. So that's the first audience. Second one is your script editor and your producer. You want them to go, oh, zing, I love this. This is great. I can see potential in it. The third is you want the people who are in the studio to have a fantastic time, to feel like they're getting really interesting stuff to do. And then, of course, there's the audience who buy the product. You want them to think, they've invested their money wisely. But I think each of those has got different aspects to it, and you want to try and combine all of those things. So having said that, when I came to write the full cast audio for Warship, it was great that I was very enthusiastic about it. David and the franchise owner loved it as well. The actors each had a chunk of useful, interesting stuff to do, and it played into the interest and enthusiasm of the audience in saying, I wonder what happened between those 2 series.
You actually then turned that audiobook into a novel.
Yeah, that was a bit unusual. And again, I was very happy to do that as well. This was in the days when Big Finish were doing printed books as well as online ones. So they want to do this as an online-only novelization. That was good fun as well, because my enthusiasm for writing Doctor Who and writing fan fiction quite early on was from having read the novelizations of Doctor Who and of Blake 7, particularly the books by Terence Dix and the ones that Trevor Hoyle had written for Blake 7. And also I used to read all of the James Blish Star Trek, the sort of short. They have 3 stories in each book for the Star Trek novelizations. So I used to read those a lot as well. So the idea of writing my own novelization of my own story was fantastic, and I really enjoyed that. And because it needed to be, I forget how long, 50,000 words, something like that, there wasn't enough script to pad out. So I wrote some extra bits to broaden the story, and also to make a virtue of the fact it was a book and not just a transcript of the audio.
Yeah. So is it much of a difficult process changing an audio into a novel?
It's straightforward because you've got the outline of the story already. And let's be honest, you've got all the dialogue as well. So what you can do is give a little bit more insight into what's going on. When I write fiction, when I write prose, I should say, my preference is to have limited third-person perspective. So you have a principal character in a particular scene who is observing what's going on. So he or she is thinking about what they're seeing and what they're reacting to. And so everything is mediated by their experience rather than a sort of omniscient view. You're not just looking down from on high at everything that's going on, which is another way of doing it. So when it came to writing the novelization, I'd already got these sections where it was Callie's perspective, or it was Jenna's perspective, or it was Avon's perspective. So I'd already thought through what their reactions might be. So that informed the way in which I wrote the novelization, without spelling it out laboriously about exactly what they were thinking or doing. Yeah. So in a sense, it was straightforward. Plus, I knew the story well because I'd been working on it with the audience.
Yeah. So Warship was such a success, bringing the whole cast together. Big Finish decided to commission a full series. Mm-hmm. So your first one contribution there was Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Who was it looking after the whole series at that point in the vision of Blake 7, or were you just being poured in to do individual scripts?
I think the idea was that there was a theme running through them, and we were told which were how the stories were all going to tie together and where ours fitted in. That was about the the idea that the Federation had come up with their own version of Aurak as being a worrying thing that our heroes had to investigate and deal with. So that was broadly the brief. My story was the one where they discovered what it was. So essentially that was my brief. So I knew where it fitted in. And I also knew that because of the way they were going to be recording the different episodes, that I had certain characters in the cast who I could use as primary and others who I would only be able to have in a couple of scenes. So I think that with that, it was, I knew that I could only have a few scenes with Jenna and Callie in. But the rest of the contemporary cast I could use as much as I wanted. So that informed the way in which I thought, okay, so I'd quite like to have Jenna and Callie appear in the story rather than, have people just talk about they've gone off somewhere else. So I had to have something meaningful and useful for them to do, but also that they could conceivably do within a short period of time. And that gave me the idea of having them involved at the very early part of the story, and then towards the end, have them in peril, so that they actually had something meaningful to do in the story, even though they only had a few scenes.
Blake 7, Mirror.
Aurak, can you confirm the destination coordinates?
Of course I can. I have decoded Federation signals that place the Federac device on the 4th natural satellite of the gas giant Stellidar.
On screen, tactical display.
Confirm.
No wonder Federac's hidden out there. It's well away from the usual Federation trade routes and military complexes.
Great. We're in the back of Beyond. Nobody here but us chickens and a horde of Federation security, I'll bet.
Move aside, you imbeciles.
Travis, what's he doing here?
If Blake and his crew won't come to you, then I'll just have to chase them myself.
And that broken up old planet hopper?
Is this it? We'll be lucky if it survives liftoff.
Anything down there?
Another dead end. You must be getting used to those, Blake.
Set in a course for Stellidar 4. That's where he'll be going.
Stellidar 4 is a Category Alpha Federation facility.
That's my route in.
We're running out of options.
If the Liberator doesn't get back here soon, our only choice will be about how we prefer to die.
Execute Protocol 9 Gamma 1.
No! Ava! Not Blake as well!
9 Gamma 1, removal complete. Good. There were no evidence left behind.
Subscribers get more at bigfinish.com.
So back then it was all about scheduling. They'd schedule different actors for different days, and you'd have to film. So Sally and Jan would have filmed, recorded their scenes on a different day when they were in studio, and inserted to the main block of yours, right?
I mean, it's nice that they can all be in the studio together. There's obviously these were in pre-COVID times. Now it's very rare for anyone to be in the studio at all. But yeah, so you're also thinking about what are the dynamics of a particular scene as well. If you're going to have the actors together, you can never guarantee that the actors will be together. So for Warship, for example, they were all in the studio at the same time, apart from Paul Darrow, who was unavailable on the day when they were recording most of that. So someone read in for him, and he did his separately.
So after a couple of they did a couple of seasons, because they did a sort of first, second season, then they did a third, then another first, second, and then it just had to go to the box sets. So you weren't involved in only that, but unfortunately we've lost a lot of the main cast members over the last couple of years for Paul and Jackie and Gareth being the main ones in terms of. Now, when we finally lost Paul Darrow, it felt like that would be the end of Blake 7 for Big Finish, and I was very much bemoaning the fact, kind of hoping that maybe they'd bring back Liberator Chronicles or something similar. But then there was this flash of inspiration by someone that there was ways of doing stories still involving the regular cast, but linking them in with other stories. Whose brainwave was that?
I don't know. I think it was David Richardson, because David's been very involved in the Blake 7s over the years, setting them up, because he's a huge Blake 7 fan. So I think it was David.
Okay, so the first things released was the Avalon, 2 Avalon stories. you weren't involved with them at all, or were you?
No, I knew about those only when I was asked to be involved in the
Clone
in the
Masters?
subsequent ones. Yeah.
Okay. So, because was all of that organised together? So, Clone Masters, Bayban the Butcher, the Terra Nostra, Avalon, have all those been running concurrently in terms of planning, or did they do?
No, they did the Avalon ones first. So I didn't even know what the stories were in those. When I was commissioning the next 3 box sets, I think I got hold of the Bayban script by Neil, because I knew I'd be commissioning the 3 Bayban in the box set. Although that was actually quite late on. I'd already commissioned the outlines there, so I didn't know the events of that particular episode until quite late on. But when I was commissioning these, because David had asked me to be the script editor for all 3 box sets, I knew that we wanted to have this new character, the psychostrategist Hinton, as being a recurring character. So I had an idea about what the journey for her might be over the period of 9 stories. I knew which actors we had available and interested to be involved in the various box sets. And so I wrote a brief for each of the 3 box sets for the various authors we were commissioning, and said, here's the broad scope of what we're trying to do. Off you go, come up with some brilliant ideas. But yes, all 9 scripts were commissioned at the same time. And I indulged myself by being able to write the final one, which again was a sort of jigsaw episode, tying things up in what I hope was a compelling way.
Yes, as we speak, I haven't yet got to hear it. I was hoping to get to it before tonight, but it's only just been released.
What is it? It only came out, what, three days ago?
3 days on Sunday. So I got downloaded, but I didn't unfortunately get to it. I was thinking about just jumping to your episode, and then
it's brilliant. You'll love it.
Yeah, but I thought I can't do that. I've got to listen to the first 2 first.
Mm-hmm.
So explain a bit. Can you explain now what your role is, how you got it? So as script editor, it sounds also like you're a bit of producer if you're also commissioning. What is your new role as?
I'd become the producer over the period of that time. So I was originally asked to script edit all 9 scripts, and I had the liberty to write as many as I thought was prudent. So the temptation is to be greedy and write lots, because I just love it. But on the other hand, I know that you need to be able to get these things done to be production ready and to be worth listening to. So I relied on the expertise and skills of talented writers elsewhere to come up with most of the scripts, and did one myself. So I was commissioning and script editing these, and then partway through the Clone Masters, because obviously we were going to studio at different times for them, David realized he'd got a lot of other stuff happening and asked me whether I would co-produce the Bayban box set, and then produce the Terra Nostra box set, which hadn't yet got into casting and production. And then as a result of that, David thought I must have been doing okay, so he said, actually, we'd like to commission some more.
Great. So Clone Masters is 3 stories, all by Tim Foley. So was that your call or David Richardson's call to make it a trilogy by one?
David suggested that at the start, and I thought, I wonder if that's prudent. Not that I don't like Tim's writing; I think he's fantastic. But on the other hand, you want it to be achievable. You don't want to overload somebody with too much, spread them too thin, and you also want each of the stories to be distinctive, because you don't really want there to be one big 3-part story, all with the sort of same tone. Or at least I didn't want that. So with that in mind, when I sent the brief out to Tim, I politely explained that we'd like them to be distinct in tone. He could link them as much as he liked, but we wanted them to be distinct in tone. And you know what? I think he did that really well.
Yep.
Each of them is a different aspect, different location. Even on the Clone Masters world, the locations are for those second and third episodes are very distinctive. There's some continuity with the characters, but the actions and motivations and themes are very distinct. So I think he did that really well.
So how much work do you have to do as these scripts come in?
In what way? You mean rewriting them?
What sort of touching up do you do? I mean, Russell T Davies is renowned for he just basically rewrote everyone's scripts, bar a few authors.
I think that's because writing for telly is so difficult, and also the kind of budgeting that you have with TV is different as well. So it's not like you're suddenly going to discover that you can't afford a particular sound effect when you're doing an audio. Whereas you might think, actually that scene where the Doctor and his companion drop through a lift and they're under gunfire and the monster is trying to break through the wall, the budget won't allow for that now. So what are we going to do to rewrite that, and what effect does that have on the dialogue? You don't get that with an audio. With the audios, what you're looking for is consistency. You want it to sound like the TV. You want it to sound like the TV series. So sometimes it's whether something is characteristically Blake 7 or in the nature of that character, or sometimes I'll spot something which might be a link to another story, or this would be a really good callback to earlier in the episode, or that bit isn't quite clear. Because when you're writing something, you're quite close to it. You don't always, you're making assumptions in your head from the outline you wrote to what actually gets on the page to what then gets recorded. So I'm listening out or reading out for that at the script stage. What I don't do is go and rewrite everything and then just present that back and say, there you go. The way I script edit things is I like to do it in line on the script itself. So some script editors that I've worked with will send you notes in an email saying, here are my observations about your script. And you then have to sort of relate that back to what they're saying and interpret it in the context of where you'd written that thing in the script. Sometimes they can be very precise and sometimes they're infuriatingly vague. My approach is to put that in line in the script using word notation and send that back. And the reason for that is not to say you must do it like this. It's to put it in the context that they can see where I'm talking about it. And my notes almost invariably are, this is just a suggestion. Do you think this works? Because if you don't, take it out because you're the writer. Very occasionally, I'll say something like, that's not right because it contradicts some bit of continuity. Very, very rarely you'll say that doesn't sound like that particular character. Because, you're hiring people as writers who know and love the series. So they've got an instinct for it already. So that's my approach as the script editor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's great to get insights. So Tim Foley, very experienced writer, and did an amazing job with the Clone Master. I mean,
almost all these writers are more experienced writers than I am.
Okay, well,
that's why I'm hiring them, because they're brilliant.
I was going to ask you about Bayban, because these are three women. So you give the bloodthirsty evil man to three women, which is, I don't know what it is about British women and the ability they've got to write macabre murder stuff. But Catherine Armitage, Lizzie Hopley,
they might hear this.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Hey, I've said this to some of them myself. But Catherine Armitage, Lizzie Hopley, and Elizabeth Miles are three newly establishing themselves writers, and they've started to do some really fantastic stuff. But some of number of works last year. Now, once again, were they recommended that you should ask them? How did you get to work with those three women?
David and I talked about which writers. We were looking for a diverse range of people from experiences and backgrounds, and not just to go to the people who had been hired before. Not that the people we'd hired before aren't terrific. It's just you want to have a bit more variety, and we knew that they'd done good stuff for some of the other ranges already, and that we thought they were enthusiasts of Blake 7, which is another helpful thing to do. I have worked on franchises in the past where some of the people involved with them weren't fans of the series, and I think that showed.
Yeah.
But with these, they're all enthusiasts and just love the idea of bringing back Bayban as well. So when you send them an email saying, are you interested in Blake 7? And they say, yeah. And I send them the briefs. It's brilliant to get an email back where the people are saying, oh, fantastic, it's Bayban, we can do this and this and this. So that's great. The other thing is, you're looking for people who've got that variety of perspective from other things they've written. Some of the people you're hiring have got experience of writing other franchises or other formats. Some of them have been actors. Some of them have been directors. So that all feeds into the experience of writing a script.
Was it refreshing for Colin Baker to be doing something different to the Doctor for a change? Did that come through?
Yeah, I joked with Colin, oh gosh, it must have been on Twitter years and years ago. I'd sent something about, I can't remember how it came up, but I'd said we really ought to get Big Finish to bring back Bayban. You could be his dad. And Colin tweeted back, his dad? His dad? Surely you mean his brother, or perhaps Bayban himself. I don't think he died really, And that was, 10 years ago, something like that. So it was kind of one-off joke. But it's always been at the back of my mind. And the idea of thinking about bringing back Bayban, because you might think from the evidence of the TV series, well, he obviously died, as did so many Blake Seven guest characters. But, there is that sort of possibility of an out without cheating.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of doing that and making that part of the box set. So one of the stories is set when Bayban is not the complete monster we know from the TV series. He's establishing his criminal career. So that was quite nice. And that gave us an excuse also to have an episode with Jenna before she was on the Liberator as well. The second one was, so suppose he managed to escape from Kizan in some implausible manner. He would have to re-establish himself because, everything else was wiped out. So he's crawled from the ashes of a city. How does he re-establish himself? So that was the brief for the second one. And the third one was, so at some point, let's assume he re-establishes himself in his full pomp as he was in the TV series. What would he be like then? What might his motivations be? So that was the thought process for each of the three stories and linking them together. And that was the brief for each of the writers that I gave them. And then they just came up with 2 or 3 ideas each for these, and I picked the ones I liked best, or in some cases said, I'll have a little bit of that and I'll have a little bit of that. And do you think that'll work? And they said, yeah, that's great.
Hello again, Bayban.
You?
Yes. This will be quite the reunion.
Bayban? But he's dead.
He's looking remarkably healthy for a corpse.
From Big Finish Productions, The Worlds of Blake Seven, Bayban the Butcher.
Where are my manners? You think I was raised by mutoids? Please, sit down. Can I interest you in a drink?
It's no use turning on the charm, Bayban.
But I always make an effort for guests. Look, new boots, Miss Stannis.
Captain Stannis.
Oh yes, you're a captain. I'm a captain. You might think you're better than me, but the Federation treats us both the same, you'll admit that much.
Perhaps.
So, we need to work together.
Leaving so soon?
Who the hell are you? Unhand me, or I'll break your arm.
Nice and still now. Huh? You don't want to fight a Federation ambassador in front of the Royal Guard.
You're no ambassador.
And you're not as sharp as they say, Butcher.
Travis? Impossible.
Says the man who died on Kizan.
Perfect. Come one, come all. To Bayban's bloodbath.
Bayban? Oh, is that his name?
Butch? Bayban!
Bayban? Bayban!
King Bayban. Villa, you don't sound at all happy to see me when I've gone to all the trouble of preparing a magnificent banquet.
You really shouldn't have.
Oh, Villa. All you had to do was open one little door. And instead, you almost got me killed.
I did no such thing. You blew yourself up.
So much for the great Bayban the Butcher.
Bayban the Butcher has survived bigger explosions than that. I crawled from the ashes of a city.
Big Finish. We love stories.
You shut your mouth. I'm a terrible man.
Okay, so that is your role. So your role was to think through the 3 stories, where you wanted them to go. So the Tim Foley one, you just gave it to Tim and said, this is what you want. But with this second box set, it seems like you had a lot more creative control, and I think maybe with Terra Nostra too, deciding this is the form we want to take, this is going to be time periods. And so that was a lot more you forming the outline and then the writers then pitching to you what they wanted.
Yeah, and I also had a thought about how all 9 stories might fit together as well. You don't want people to have to buy, even though we want them to buy product, you don't want people to go, I don't understand what's happening in this box set because I haven't bought the previous one. So you want the entire Bayban box set to make sense on its own, if that's the only one you bought, because people have got all 3 discs. You might say, well, is that true if they're they're just going to download individual stories? But that was my thought process. But I think that you want to have also some additional reward for people who are enthusiasts for the whole lot and follow the entire series. So I was already thinking, all right, so if we are going to have Jenna and Hinton knowing each other at the start of the first box set in that first scene on the old Federation outpost, when Hinton steers Jenna towards Dr. Sim, I was already thinking that needs to be a follow-up from when we first see Jenna and Hinton working together at a point before Jenna was on the Liberator. So I was already thinking, right, so that's the story I'm going to commission in part for one of the Bayban stories. And I also quite like the idea that not everything happens in sequence, in historical sequence, as you're listening to the stories. So it's so the first Bayban episode is like a sort of flashback to what life was like before the first Clone Masters story. Yeah. So there's an element of reward for people who've committed themselves to the whole series.
Yeah, and that first story in Bayban actually would now be chronologically the earliest Blake 7 story there is.
I suppose it would be, yeah. And then, sorry, just to follow on that thought as well, I was then thinking, right, so we've got Jenna when she's on the Liberator. We've got Jenna before she's on the Liberator. So when we came to commission the Terra Nostra set, I was thinking, right, let's have a story of Jenna after she left the Liberator. So the first story of the Terra Nostra set is Jenna returning to a role as a smuggler, making a new life after Liberator.
And before her final end in Jenna's story.
Spoilers.
We hear it all. Abigail Thor was cast as Hinton, and she's just done an amazing job in terms of a carry-through character throughout the box sets. Do you have anything to do with the casting, or did you just...
No, that was all down to Lisa Bayban.
Right.
Yeah, so she cast her in the very first episode, and that meant obviously she carried on. Louise Jameson and Nigel Fairs directed the second set, so they inherited that element of the casting, but obviously came up with their own cast for the other characters. And then Lisa worked on the Terra Nostra set as director.
Do you know how Lisa got the job of directing the couple of box sets?
I think that David had commissioned her to do those before I'd come on board.
Okay. And then with the Terra Nostra, it's 3 very experienced writers in James Kettle, yourself, and Robert Valentine.
They are much more experienced than I am.
So who script edited you?
Simon Guerrier, and that was a suggestion from David Richardson.
Right.
I've worked with Simon before, and indeed Simon has scripted things as well. And he's a pal, so that's nice. He knows he can be quite candid with me if he needs to be, and I won't be upset.
If we're going to make a deal, we need to start out by being honest with each other. I'm Jenna Stannis.
Who are you?
She's a terrorist.
A freedom fighter?
She's one of Blake's crew.
Where is the Liberator now? We were separated after the war. I've got no part in any of it anymore.
From Big Finish Productions, The Worlds of Blake 7, The Terra Nostra.
The Terra Nostra are here on Store Jaden. I shouldn't be surprised they've got a presence on every colonized world.
Have you dealt with the Terra Nostra before?
It didn't leave me rushing back to repeat the experience.
You must have made quite an impression.
Let's just say it involved a big explosion and an awful lot of hard drugs.
She resembles a known enemy of the Terra Nostra. Confirm that, and it will be excellent news. And a great opportunity for you.
Yes, Enforcer. I won't make any mistakes.
You certainly won't make any you'll live to regret.
Sorry for keeping you. We had some business to take care of.
So did I, until you kidnapped me.
Think of it as a rescue. The Federation are no friends of mine, Villa, believe me. I have no interest in turning you over to them.
Then, what do you want?
I want to offer you a job.
A job?
Villa's comrades crossed the Terra Nostra a while back in Space City.
How did you know?
Villa Restor,
Who wants to know?
you hurt?
I'll live, unless your enforcer has other plans.
As a matter of fact, he does.
Oh, and what's that?
Retribution.
Just my luck to bump into you again.
There's no luck about it.
I think you're taking the whole puppeteer thing a bit literally.
You can't see it because you're too close to it. You're involved. You all are.
I promise to make you rich if you bring me Rog Blake. You can predict what will happen if you don't.
You'll withhold my contract fee.
I was going to say your head on a spike, but yes, that too.
Not your style. You prefer a clean kill.
Try me and see. Any progress?
That's what I came to tell you. Villa Restor has arrived on Space City.
Hello, Hinton.
Jenna, I didn't expect to see you.
Lucky for you that I had unfinished business on Space City.
Oh, I can't wait to see Avon's face when you come back on board.
He'll be trying to reach his friends, but when he does, we'll be waiting.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
This is Immy Pack. You can use it to choose when your victim dies. Just like the Liberator crew. They're all marked for death.
Just a question on the casting. To have those two different iterations of Travis, that wasn't the original idea, was it? That came on after, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. The idea originally was that it was Brian Croucher was Travis, and when Tim was I can't remember whether he got to the scripting stage at that point, or whether it was still the outline. But you know, we wanted it to be Travis revisiting the Clone Masters world that we'd seen him visit briefly in Weapon, and to commission secretly a clone of himself for his own nefarious purposes. So, you know, we're well into season B by this stage. And so we obviously thought there would be a confrontation between Travis and his clone. But the way in which Tim was writing it was to differentiate a performance by Brian Croucher talking to Brian Croucher. And as we were doing this, I thought, well, you know what? There's no reason why we couldn't plausibly have the other Travis. The TV series rather waves away the fact that they look and sound quite different. I think there's the very slightest comment about him having been to reconditioning in the episode when Brian Croucher first turns up. But otherwise, we just kind of accept the conventions of TV. So I thought, well, you know, in that case, why don't we just accept the convention and have the younger Travis be the clone who's been created? And not make a big fuss about it. So as Tim was writing it, there were some elements in the script. I can't remember whether I pointed it out or whether he recognized it himself. That they were kind of rather knowing comments about, you know, you look completely different or that kind of stuff. I think we both realized that was kind of over egging it. It just accept that people know that Brian Croucher doesn't look like Stephen Greif. and let's just make it a story about the clones, the clone meeting the original. But it meant that when he wrote the script, he could write knowing that you would have those differences in performance, because obviously their voices are different. So that was an additional benefit to the script. Now, having said that as well, it's a kind of fanish preoccupation. There are two Travises, and having them both in the same episode was too delicious a thing not to do. But doing it in a plausible way. Now, one of the things I emphasize repeatedly to people when commissioning Blake 7 is Blake 7 doesn't have time travel. So it's not something we're going to investigate in Blake 7, because it's just not something that's part of the TV series. It will be uncharacteristic of the TV series to do that in the audios. So you can't have him sort of popping through a wormhole or something like that. So that was the excuse for getting them both together. And as I say, when I had this idea and asked David whether that was going to be feasible, and David said yes, Tim was delighted by it and made a fantastic job of it as well. Plus, it's now given as a clone to use elsewhere in subsequent stories. I almost used the Travis clone in my finale for the Terra Nostra. In fact, my original outline had him in it. Hope Stephen Greif doesn't hear this, because obviously I've done him out of a job for that particular episode. And I realised that because we'd got a number of other characters who Villa was meeting, like, for example, Hinton, again, having Villa come around another corner and go, oh, it's you as well, I thought was probably a bit too much. So in the end, I was a different character than Travis for Villa to encounter. And who did it become? Oh, it became Councillor Zuconna, was the character who Travis would have been had he been in my final episode.
It was nice having the clone Travis come back in The Butcher's Wife and just see he was turning more evil. And there was actually, I mean, The Butcher's Wife is probably the darkest that any of the scripts go in terms of really depressing, in terms of, I mean, Blake 7, they lose regularly, so it's not unusual. But the whole episode just goes dreadfully wrong by the last 10 minutes. It's hard to know who's more evil, Bayban or Travis, and they're sort of competing with who can actually do more damage.
Absolutely. That whole story starts off as a quite light tone. You think,
beautiful.
Oh, it's quite funny.
It's lovely.
You've got, he's Bayban masquerading as this person, and you get him doing his seductive turn with Arla and going out into the marketplace, and and it seems teasing and frivolous, and then, as you say, it becomes darker and darker. You get that confrontation with Travis and with Bayban at the dance. I mean, they're sort of, if you like, dancing around each other in terms of who they are and how they got there and the nature of their role there and what they're trying to do and whether they're going to combine forces or whether they're going to be in opposition. And of course, Hinton manipulating things in the background. So I thought that was, I loved all the scripts. I especially loved the way in which she ran that thread to the whole story. And it ends, as you say, in that sort of brutal thing where,
spoilers.
Spoiler alert, Bayban's final act at the end.
Yeah, listen, I think, as you said before, I think Blake 7, because the budget was on, and in some ways Doctor Who too, what you rely on, and Blake 7 in particular, is characters and dialogue. And I think, story as well, but what has always made Blake 7 stand out for me in terms of just this amazing show is the characters, the way they're drawn, the dialogue they have, and then the stories they put through. And what this whole box has managed to capture, even though you've only got one or two original cast in a story, it still managed to capture that whole feel of what Blake 7 was. And so that tone has really carried really well through the box sets.
Thank you. That's certainly what we're trying to do. And also that characteristic dialogue repartee you get, particularly with some of the characters. It's the way in which they pick up on ideas and comments in what someone else has said. So when I'm doing the script editing, those are the kinds of things I'm looking to suggest to the authors, to enhance what they put in there. Some reference back to what was said earlier, or a way of phrasing things in a characteristically Villa or Callie or Jenna way.
Peter, with all the things that you've written over the years, is there any one story or project that you've worked on that you have a particular fondness for and some nice memories of?
I especially like doing Warship because of the way it evolved. As I said earlier, it came at a time when I was feeling a bit low, having not had a chance to write the Tom Baker story, having got so far down the line, and then it all didn't happen, which, these things can happen. So it was a particularly wonderful thing to get a chance to do. And then the way it evolved into becoming the full cast audio rather than a narrated book, and then being able to have all of the cast, knowing I could have Aurak and Zen, even asking whether I could, at the last minute, asking whether I could have a scene with Servalan in it, because originally she wasn't in the story. So I was allowed to do that. Had I been cheeky enough, I should probably have wangled to have Travis in as well. But to be honest, I'm not sure I could have done it. Could have justified that. So yeah, that's one that I really loved doing. It was a lovely session to go into the studio and meet the cast, because on previous occasions when I've been into the studios to meet the cast, I've been terribly shy. So when, for example, on the Chaos Pool, which I enjoyed writing very much, I was too embarrassed and shy to talk to Peter Davison and Lalla Ward, so I just ended up making tea for everyone.
Oh.
Whereas with the Warship, I felt a bit bolder and braver, and was happy to have a chat with all of the cast in the green room. So the whole experience of the initial opportunity, the way it evolved, the way I was able to influence the people we cast, the experience of doing it in the studio, and the reaction that people had when they heard it, plus then being able to do the novelization, I think that's probably one of my standout ones. But you know what? I've pretty much enjoyed all the things I've written, because remember I said about the 4 audiences for writing? You've got to feel enthusiastic as the first audience, the first person who's writing it. I'm terrible about laughing at my own jokes. So if I write something really funny, I'll sit and laugh at it, you see. And then when I'm in the studio, if I'm in the back of the booth with the director, I'm laughing at hearing, for example, Michael Keating, delivering one of my funny lines, because he's so good at it, you see. So yeah, I'm my own best audience. There you are.
Well, can I just say, as a huge Blake 7 fan, I'm really appreciative of what you've brought back to the range. I'm so excited by what we've been getting for the last few months, and looking forward to whatever happens in the future. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for saying that. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to continue doing it.
Blake 7, Warship.
We came here to deliver a death blow to the Federation.
There they are.
I wanted to tear down Star One forever.
There's hundreds of ships. Hundreds!
Star One has another purpose. It controls a satellite minefield, a barrier between our galaxy and the next.
We're under attack!
Then, initiate pattern Sigma positioning. Random maneuvers at your discretion.
Confirm.
Can you see all those mines? Hundreds of them.
They're burrowing into the outer hull.
2 more ships are through.
Should we pursue?
Leave it. Stay focused on the gap in the grid.
Goodbye, Blake. I wish I could say it's been a pleasure.
Avalon, fire!
Subscribers get more at bigfinish.com.
And that was a trailer for Warship, one of Peter's favourite projects that he's worked on. So it was lovely to be able to chat with Peter, wasn't it, Philip?
It was great. He's such a friendly guy, and had a lot to tell us. And yeah, hopefully many, many more things to come in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we'll finish up with some recommendations for today. And I'm going to start, but hang on. No, I can't do that. It's not my turn. It's your turn, Philip.
It's my turn. I'll go then. So I listened to a few of Peter's things in preparation to talk to him today. So I'm going to recommend one of the Liberator Chronicles. I think people know by now how much I love the Chronicles, Doctor Who.
Anything with Chronicles on it.
Everything with Chronicles on it. And so this was... good question. I think it's number 9. It's his story Incentive, which he mentioned. It's the first time Stephen Pacey... no, I'm lying. It's number 6. So the box set, number 6, Liberator Chronicles... he wrote the first story called Incentive, which is the first time Stephen Pacey came back and did a Blake 7 story. So that's pretty exciting for that reason. And it's kind of set just after Warship, and the crew are still looking for Jenna and Blake, and they've got an understanding where they think they are, but Avon and Tarrant have been captured. And so it actually follows their story. There's interrogation stuff. There's also stuff on the run. It's really well constructed. It goes a bit all over the place. There's, lots of stuff in it. And the box set's actually really worth getting too, for the other reason. It's also got Jenna's story and Blake's story on it. So Big Finish sort of did an end. So in the last episode, Blake, we hear Blake talks to Tarrant, telling him what happened to Jenna, in terms of she tried to make the run one more, like she ended up with all smugglers, tried to make the run one time too many. And so there's a whole story devoted just to Jenna and how that character ends, called Jenna's story. And then there's one called Blake's story, which you expect is going to be similar. It's set on Gorda Prime, but it's not quite what you expect. It's got a few interesting twists and turns. So that whole box set, number 6, has 3 very interesting stories. The first one by Peter, but the other 2 stories are fantastic as well. So, what about you, Dwayne? What would you like to recommend?
I'm going to go completely left field here and choose something, because we're getting close to Australia Day. I actually started listening to an audiobook reading of a book called Australia Day, which is written by Stan Grant, who, for those who are listening overseas, Stan Grant is a very well-known Australian journalist, Indigenous journalist. He produced a documentary recently on Adam Goodes a couple of years ago. Can't remember the name of the documentary now off the top of my head, but I think it was produced after he wrote this book on Australia Day, and he talks about his experience of racism in Australia, and it's good because it gives you a different perspective. I don't know whether it's just because I'm getting older, but I feel like people are getting more and more divided about everything, not just matters of race, but everything on the political spectrum. Everyone's divided. If you're not on my side, you're my enemy. Instead of a more sort of approach where you want to actually get to know someone else's view. And that's what I think more people should do. So whatever your thoughts are on any political type subject, Stan Grant is fantastic to listen to. He's a great speaker. What do you think of his voice? I think he's great. He'd work great in a Doctor Who audio, if you ask me.
He would indeed. So, as I say, so for our listeners overseas, Australia Day is becoming a bit of a divisive day in
It has been for a few years now.
It has been a few years, and depending where you are, I'm in Sydney, so we're a bit more radical. Not as radical as Melbourne. Melbourne likes to be the most radical of cities, but in terms of Australia Day, celebrates the start of Australia as a nation, which is the day that the British landed the first fleet in Australia. And of course, over the last few years, we've come to realise, well, actually, there was people here for 40,000 years before the British came. And unfortunately, with a lot of colonisation, a large part of what happened was the entire indigenous population were being wiped out and murdered. And so there's a lot of feeling in terms of, can we actually celebrate a day where the original inhabitants were being invaded? And this is actually the right date. So there's lots of movement in terms of possibly renaming the day. There's also talk about moving the day to a day that both Indigenous Australians and the rest of us who've all come later can appreciate and enjoy. So it is a hot political issue. I've never discussed with Dwayne what his issues are. But yeah, so that's coming up. And as I said, every year it becomes slightly more divisive what's going on.
I don't have any issues, but I am always interested in other people's experience and opinion, and especially with my recent travels through the outback. It was actually when I was in Alice Springs, which is a town right in the middle of Australia, where we were travelling through, and the Indigenous festival called Parjima was going on, which is a spectacular lights show, lots of different Indigenous activities going on throughout there. And Stan Grant was one of the guests. Obviously, he couldn't be there in person, so he was there. He was there live, but he was on Zoom being interviewed, talking about some of his experiences, particularly about the Adam Goodes documentary. So if anyone doesn't know Adam Goodes, he's an Australian football player who has experienced a lot of racism, and he actually quit football because of the constant racist abuse that he was getting. And I've been fascinated with getting to know about these people's experience more and more. And I love Stan Grant anyway. I've loved him for years. He sort of disappeared for a while because I think he was overseas. But now that he's back in Australia, back working for the ABC, get to hear a lot of him these days. So, yeah, Australia Day. Stan Grant.
Sounds great.
All right, that'll do us for this instalment of the Sirens of Audio. It's been great to have your company, Philip.
It's been great to have yours too, Dwayne.
And it's been great to have all of yours listening and watching. So thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time. This has been the Sirens of Audio, episode 94, The Worlds of Peter Anghelides, with our guest, the man himself, with your hosts, Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by the Jackpot Golden Boys. Drop us some feedback on Apple Podcasts or your favourite podcast app, and drop us a comment and a like if you're watching via YouTube. Find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at Audio Sirens. See our full list of episodes and more at sirensofaudio.com. And if you're debating which Travis is best, the answer is they both are. And now you can follow their ongoing story in the audio adventures of the Worlds of Blake 7. And why is that such a good thing, I hear you ask? Because audio drama... Roar!